Welcome to this Getting Started with SharePoint Framework Extensions tutorial series. And in this tutorial, we are building our first ListView Command Set extension. You can use the ListView Command Sets to add buttons and menu items in any lists and libraries in SharePoint. And then when you click the button, you can actually control what happens then. So you can have a really complicated scenarios using panels and modal dialogues and complex dialogues if you prefer, or it might be more simplified scenarios as well. But the main point here is that with ListView Command Set extensions is that you're able to add those buttons in toolbar or in the menu items of the list and libraries. Now, this video has been recorded in February 2020, and it's using SharePoint Framework version 1.10. If you are using a newer version, always have a look on the written tutorial guidance of these videos. So there's always a written documentation available as well, which is most up to date. So the videos are not updated as frequently as the documentation. But let's jump right into it. So let me actually go to my Windows 10 machine here, where we're going to then start creating our solution. So let me start my command line. I'm going to use PowerShell just from a simplicity perspective, and let me go to the typical location where I'm actually putting all of my code. So I have quite a few tutorials structures already here available, all being created in 2020 or in January or in February. So you'll know the timelines when this has been recorded as well. Now, let me actually clear the folder, and let's actually create a command extension folder. And let's go to that command extension folder. In here, we're going to execute the Microsoft SharePoint human generator. And let's avoid any typos. So here we go, SharePoint Framework human generator. And that's going to then start asking the normal questions. I'm going to use the default value. We're going to target SharePoint Online. In this case, we're going to use the current folder, and we want to install this explicitly to a site. So we're not going to use the tenant deployment option, and the same applies for the required permission. So let's not actually use that either. We're going to target, or we're going to create an extension. And in this case, we are creating a ListView Command Set. So we're adding a toolbar buttons and menu buttons to a list. And let's use the default values just to get started on things. Again, the command set name and description really are not visible for end users. So these are more impactful when you're creating a web part solution. And for the ListView command sets, we do not have any additional default scaffolding options. So it is basically the one option, which is a non-JavaScript framework option. And then you could potentially absolutely use React, Angular, Vue.js, Ember, whatever handlebars with this as well, just by adding the needed packages on top of the default scaffolded solution. But that's already a slightly an advanced scenario. In this case, we're going to just extend the default scaffolding to add some additional dialogues on whenever the button is actually being clicked. But let's speed up the video first to skip to the moment when the scaffolding is fully completed. Now, here we go. So the solution scaffolding is completed. Let's clean up slightly the folder or the console, and again, start our Visual Studio Code to have a look on how the structure actually look like. And as you can guess, the basic structure is exactly the same for all of the SharePoint Framework solutions. So you can always find the config folder with the specific files, and the obviously Node modules folder, SharePoint folder with some configurations. We'll get back on those slightly later. And then the source folder, which is actually containing the default scaffolded extension in this case. And obviously, if you would have multiple web parts and extensions in the same folder or same solution, they would be all in the source folder. Let's open up the manifest file first for the ListView command sets. And in here, the most important thing is actually these settings in here. So these are basically defining what are the buttons which we actually have and what we want to expose in the UX. So what kind of settings and what kind of buttons will be available in the UX side. And then we do define the location of the command 1 and the command 2 in a slightly different location. I'll come back on that one in the tutorial slightly later. But these are basically, I have a button or a menu item 1, and I have a button and menu item number 2. And they will be exposed using this icon image URL, and that's the type is a command for now. So we don't actually support any other types at least for now. Now, let me actually go to the command, to the actual code. We can see obviously base classes are available, and we inherit our implementation from there. We support typical properties settings, and the default setting was that we have two different commands. So we have a sample text 1 and 2. Again, it's really up to you what kind of properties and settings you actually wanna use in here. Now, on list updated basically, so the view is changing. You can actually decide that do we want the buttons to be visible or menu items to be visible or not. So as an example, in this case, if there are multiple selected rows in the list, then we will have the visibility for the first command as true. So the command 2 will be available always, but the command number 1 is only visible when we have multiple items selected in the list or a library. So example of how things might work out. And then if I scroll down, we can actually see that we're using a dialog alerts, and we are just outputting the text value. Again, you might output the standard value. In this case, we're just demonstrating how we can use the properties to output the property value if we want to do that. Now, let's actually do some debugging and to make sure that the default setup is working properly. So let's again go back on the serve JSON file. This might be familiar for you if you have done the field customizer extension demo or tutorial, or the application customizer tutorial. So really in here, we want to make sure that we're using a valid URL. And in my case, let's actually go and start the browser. I want to use actually my group site. Which is in that URL. And we want to actually create, we want to make sure that we're using a one list in here. So just for the sake of it, I have an existing list which is called groups, which I created as part of the field tutorial, field customizer tutorial. So I'm going to use that one. You can definitely create whatever list and library to be available for your testing as well. So I'm going to copy the URL of the list. We're going to paste that one back on the serve.json. And in here, we're basically seeing what happens behind of the scenes. So on that URL, we're going to load custom action, which is this unique custom action. And the location will be client-side extension ListView Command Set command bar. So we're adding commands to the command bar. And let's use these two properties for the setup. So that's basically what I want to do here. Now, let's go back on the console, or I prefer actually using the inline terminal, so you can actually get the terminal available in the Visual Studio Code. It is really up to your preference. So in here, I'm now doing call up serve, and that's going to then start a browser within this configuration option, given these values which we provide here. And it is actually warning us for the fact that we are loading debug scripts, and because we're developers, we know what we're doing. So let's actually click load debug scripts. And after a while, we can actually see that there the command 2 is now visible in the list. I can absolutely check it out. And we're using those dialogs. And if I select two items in here, we can see the command 2. Or a one item, excuse me, select the one item, we can actually see that there's two items available and visible. So the other one, the setting, I actually said it wrong. So the setting for the command 1 was that as long as there's an item selected in the code. And let's actually go back on the code and double check that one, because I actually did tell that in a wrong way. If selected rows length equals 1. So if there is a one row selected as stated clearly in the code, then the visibility of that command is actually true. So that's a pretty well defined how it's designed to work. And we can actually see it in the UX as well. So if we don't have any item selected, we can only see command 2. If we have one item selected, we can see the command 1 as well. If we have multiple commands selected, we can only see the command 2. Again, depending on your business scenario, you might design whatever kind of experience in here based on your design and business requirements. Now, let's actually go back on our source code. Let's do some modifications here. So let's actually change the on execute slightly, and I'm going to copy the code directly from the written tutorial, so I get it right, and I will basically replace the switch. And let's see what we're actually doing here. So we are basically taking advantage of dialog prompt, where we are asking an input from the end user, which is demonstrating one of the capabilities with dialogues and dialog framework. And then we are actually providing that value which the user provided as an alert as well for the command 2. Now, in our case, the gulp serve is already running, so we don't have to restart that. If you did stop the gulp serve, you can actually restart the gulp serve in here. Let me go back on the browser. Let's request the page again. We want to load the debug scripts, basically debug manifest file pointing to the HTTP localhost. And now we can see that we have the command 2 available in here. Let's click the command 2. And we can actually see a prompt rather than just an alert of the value. And let's provide value to dialog entry as the value, and OK. And actually, we can see that that was the entry what we were requesting from the end user. So quite simple scenario, quite simple thing, but we're taking advantage of the dialog framework, which is natively available within a SharePoint framework or inside of SharePoint Online as well, or SharePoint in general, SharePoint Online and SharePoint 2019, just to be super precise. Okay, so that's working. So how do we package things up? So let's actually go back in our solution, and let's actually pause our console. Let's go in the Visual Studio Code side. There we go. So let's go back on and have a look on the packaging of things. So how do we package extensions? The same thing as field customizers. We're using elements XML file. In this case, we are using the site installed specific model. So you need to install the solution to a site, and then as part of that installation, we're adding a one custom action, which is then pointing out to the client-side component ID and given these properties. So technically, you can do this using a tenant deployment option as well, and we'll come back on that one slightly later. But the whole point of this one is that you, as part of the installation of this solution to the site, we're adding this entry pointing to this unique ID, and which is pointing to the component hosted in App Catalog, and then the SharePoint knows that we need to render that component ID whenever we're watching a SharePoint list. And we're registering this to registration type 100, and that means that we're pointing out to any SharePoint list, which is a custom list rather than just a library. So whenever we're creating a new list, it will actually have this experience as well. Good. So quite simple scenario. You could actually modify the setting slightly, so we can actually pinpoint this to have two different sent entries. So we could actually have an additional custom action here to a registration ID of 101, and that would actually be then a library. So we're basically library type. So that would then enable this scenario and extension also in a normal library. The other thing maybe to notice here is the location, which we're explaining in the written tutorial as well. So in here, we're basically defining that it's a command bar button, but there are multiple different options. So you are able to say, is it a context menu? Is it a command bar? Or if I get rid of that filtering, it will be actually both. So it will be a command bar and a context menu of the item. Context menu meaning that when you're selecting the item, there's the context menu selection, and then the item is selected, or the command is visible in the context menu. In our case, let's just keep the command bar there and to make things simple. Now, the client-side instance XML here is basically there if we want to take advantage of tenant-wide deployment option, and this is really there to indicate for SharePoint that, hey, we want to have this particular component extensions available across the whole tenant immediately when it's installed to the app catalog. So that's a critical option which you can take advantage. In this case, we did, as part of the solution configuration, we actually did say that we don't want to use the tenant-wide deployment option. So this setting does not have an impact. So there's no value or no no impact of this configuration, but it is a great option if you want to, for example, target an application customizer or a list view command set to all of the libraries and all of the custom lists within a tenant. So definitely something to check. Good. So let's actually close that one. We're not going to actually take advantage of that one. Let's close that one as well. Let's close the source code. Let's close the serve JSON. We want to go to the package solution. Again, this is the one which is telling SharePoint or the human generator how do we package our stuff, and we can actually see the elements XMLs and client-side instance XML available in here. We could actually get rid of the client-side instance XML now because it doesn't really have an impact because we are not doing a tenant-wide deployment option with this capability. But again, debatable. How do we actually design our solution option? Now, let's actually do gulp bundle. That's the ship. So we're getting the solution ready to package. There we go. And then we want few warnings with icons. You can actually package icons inside of the solution as well, and those can be served automatically and dynamically from the solution. So that's a pretty cool capability as well. Now let's actually do gulp package solution and that's the ship. So we're packaging the solution properly up. And there we go. And I'm going to actually do Explorer and dot. I'm just opening up the Explorer, going to the SharePoint folder, solution folder. There's our solution. And then we want to install that to our app catalog. I don't have app catalog open. So let me actually open up the app catalog from here. Let's go to apps for SharePoint. Let me drag and drop the command extension in. And it is a site-specific deployment, so the checkbox for doing a tenant-wide deployment is not enabled here. Deploy. So that's now available to be installed on a site level. And let's actually do that. So let's go back and let me close that one. That's the orders and the list in here. So let's actually go back on the site contents. Let's install that solution explicitly to this site. So it's not enabled to cross the tenant automatically, which is absolutely an option as well. But I want that solution to be explicitly available only on this site collection or a few site collections. So that's why I designed the solution settings like that. And getting that one installed on the site level. And as part of this installation, it adds or applies that configuration which we had in the element XML file. So let's one more time go back in the SharePoint assets element XML. We're adding a custom action pointing to that unique component ID, which is now installed in the app catalog. So SharePoint knows what is the component to be rendered as part of the list or as part of any custom list which is getting created in that site collection, site in this case. Good. Refresh solution has been actually installed, and that means that now if we create a new list, let's create a list called sample. So just press enter or clicking to create. And we can see a sample folder or sample list being created. And the most importantly, we can actually see the command to be immediately available. And obviously, if we now add new items here, if I add an item here, let's call that item 1. And if I activate that item, the command 1 is being visible as well. The most important thing to realize is that we don't have gulp serve running. We don't have anything running in console. So it's fully independent now being executed from app catalog, served from the app catalog, or if you have Office 365 CDN enabled, served automatically from CDN with even better performance. And we can double check that functionality is working fine. We click the command 2. Let's give it a value. It worked. Well, of course it worked. I did it. Awesome. It's always great to actually be able to finalize tutorials, and we can actually see the message SharePoint actually gives us back. So it is truly working properly, and you were able to achieve, hopefully by yourself also, the outcome of this tutorial. But that's it, what we're going to do in the ListView Command Set tutorial. Quite simple scenario, but super, super powerful. We see a lot of extensibility being introduced by using the ListView Command Sets, because again, clicking the button, you own what's going to happen. It might actually open up a panel, it might be open up things, it might actually do migrations, controls, copying, panels, whatever. You own the whole rendering experience. So the opportunities and options are infinite. So it's really up to the business requirements and up to your innovation, what you can actually achieve with the ListView command sets and the menu items. And by the way, the context menu is this one over here. So we're able to definitely add items over there in the context menu option if you're targeting the location over there as well. But that's it for this tutorial. So hopefully you find the tutorial useful. Thank you.